Back to At the Round Table with Mamley. I'm your host, Larry Ellison. We're in the 8 o'clock hour. A call-in number here is 617-282-0685. 617-282-0685. Folks, if you didn't get a chance to tune into our 7 o'clock hour, it was very powerful. We were playing some interviews from NPR. They are a wonderful wealth of knowledge for if you want to learn about history, particularly history for people of color. We were talking about the Reverse Freedom Ride. It'll be up on our broadcast. We'll be rebroadcast this again on Monday morning. You'll be able to hear. We're going to talk a little bit more about it. Also in our 9 o'clock hour, when we have our guest has arrived for our 8 o'clock hour, and we're going to introduce her shortly. Again, I want to remind the Mamleo membership today that the general membership meeting at 12 noon at Mamleo 61 Columbia Road. Again, the general membership meeting will be held today at Mamleo at 61 Columbia Road at 12 noon. Make sure if you have the time, stop in, get that information that is so needed. Like I said, I think knowledge is power, and lack of knowledge, as Councilor Yancey called in earlier, and he talked about the lack of civic engagement. We're the only city in the state, he says, that doesn't elect its school committee. And folks, was one of the things that people complain about the most. So I think that's a good segue, because we're going to take this whole day today, our remaining time here with our guest for the next hour, and we're talking about the election. For folks who don't know, who should know, there is an election coming up next Tuesday, November 5th, from 7 a.m. The polls open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. I told folks I want to see lines at the polling places like I saw at B3's Halloween party. This is bigger than giving out candy, folks. What you're going to get from there, if you don't go, you are going to get tricked and no treat. Okay? So
yes,
you never go. So I want to take this time. I want to thank welcome our guest, Julia Mejia, who is a candidate for the Boston City Council at large seat. So I just wanted a little background from her website. Julia, it's time. Driven by a lifelong pursuit of justice and equity, Julia Mejia has created countless opportunities for others to step into their power and advocate for positive change. That is why she believes it's time for that those entrusted to lead our city's government include new faces from different walks of life, striving for a voice in our institutions of power. Like many residents in the city of Boston, immigration is a part of her story. Born in the Dominican Republic, Julia arrived in the neighborhood of Dorchester when she was only 5 years old. And folks, if you see her on our screen, she looks like she's only 7. So she hasn't aged much. Raised by a single mother who was undocumented for most of her childhood, she began advocating at a young age on behalf of her mother and others who felt ignored and underserved by the very institutions that were supposed to serve them. A proud graduate of Boston Public Schools, Julia was the first in her family to graduate high school and college, and first to purchase her own home in Boston, which is almost unaffordable these days, folks. A Boston who became an entrepreneur and a voice for social justice, as well as a parent and head of a household. She created and led a civic engagement group focused on voter registration, is founder of a nonprofit education network, worked on national social justice campaigns as a producer of MTV. Through her work, Julia has become enriched by the experiences of bringing people together from all walks of life. Julia is a graduate of Dorchester High and holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from Mount Ida College. She lives in Dorchester with her daughter, Annalise, and their little Shih Toby. Is that
Shih Tzu.
Shih Tzu. Okay, see, that's why I don't have dogs. I can't even pronounce your name. Toby. But with that said, good morning,
Good
Julia
morning.
Mejia. Welcome to At the Round
Thank you.
Table, Mamley. I know it's been a long time coming for us to get together. I'm so glad and honored that you are gracing the airways with us here today. And for folks, if you have any questions for at-large candidate Julia Mejia, now is the time. The election is Tuesday. If you want to know what her policies are, what her plans are, if elected, no time like the present, 617-282-0685, 617-282-0685. Now, Julia, again, welcome to the roundtable. I
Thank
just
you.
articulated a lot of the reasons why in your bio there why you're running, but tell folks personally, they want to hear
Yeah.
from you. Why is it that at this time, at this moment, you feel the need to run for city council at large here in the city of Boston?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and good morning to all. Well, it's that whole thing when you want something done, you sometimes just got to do it yourself. And I feel oftentimes in the city of Boston in particular, we haven't built the black and brown political power, particularly in low-income communities. And I feel like with all of the stuff that's happening on the national level, we have an opportunity to really focus on what's happening here locally and creating opportunities for people who are really living these realities and doing the work to go on the inside to really cause and I wouldn't so much say disruption, but to really be able to go and bring the outside in and the inside out. And I think that in terms of politics here in Boston, for far too long, too many people have been ignored, and the issues that are impacting us on a daily basis have gone unheard. And I think now more than ever, we need people like me and others who are doing this work.
Well, this is why I say, Julie, folks need to do their homework, right?
That's right.
And learning about candidates and not just, name recognition or familiarity. Because I think looking at your bio, you are that success story, right? You are someone who came to this country, right?
Yeah.
Gave back, is giving back, right? Homeowner, parent, right? Entrepreneur, running for office, which is, people don't realize how tough it is. I'm sure you know it's very difficult.
As a single mom, it's been challenging.
Absolutely. Trying to raise money because
That's
it takes
right.
a lot to do this. And it's why I asked why one would do it, right?
Yeah.
And because to me, this, what you just talked about in black and brown, there's a lack of engagement.
That's right.
As I was saying, I saw, as I was there, you couldn't get near the police station in Mattapan on Tuesday night because there was so many people there because they were giving out candy. It was the Halloween party, and it's a huge event, and it's grown. And I just wish that our voting block was growing the way it does when they give up. Why do you think there's such a lack of engagement in the black and brown community?
Well, I covered the presidential elections in 2000 when I worked at MTV, and I had the opportunity to travel across the country trying to get young people engaged in politics, and they just felt disconnected. They just felt like no one was really talking to them or about the issues that were really impacting youth. And that was 20 years ago. And I come back, and I've been doing this work ever since, actually since I was 9 years old. But here in the city of Boston in particular, I just feel like people aren't addressing the things that we care about. And if they are, it's kind of this high level conversation happening. It's not really relatable for a lot of folks to understand how politics impacts their daily lives. And I think that we have lost faith in this system, right? I support an elected school board, like Charles Yancey as well. And it's because we need to have people in positions of power who really understand and are going to fight for the things that are needed. And I think that if we don't see ourselves reflected in candidates, we're not going to get excited about going out to the polls. And I think that it's a combination of that. And then also we have been, I wouldn't say disenfranchised, but I just feel like in many ways we have lost faith in the very same system that is supposed to serve us.
But I hear what you're saying, but there's a lot of things going on, right? Well, when we see folks like the Me Too movement, right? Black Lives Matter and other groups, well, we will get together, but it almost like it when there's a tragedy or when something goes terribly bad, right?
I know.
And that part of changing that is not just the rallies out there, but the rallies at the voting booth.
That's
right. How do we get people connected in that? Like I said, there's all kinds of ways to do that through the social media, but we're not making that connection. People you talk to, as you said, they're angry about things. They feel that things are not representative of their values or what they want. But they're not taking the opportunities to put that into a driving force at the ballot box.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is a lack of education. I launched an initiative called Determined Divas in 2015.
Explain, what does that?
Yeah, so Determined Divas, we're not really divas. We act like we are, but it's a nonpartisan, volunteer-led initiative for women of color who, back in 2015, I noticed that elected officials only came around our way when it was time for elections, and then we wouldn't see them anymore. So I created Determined Divas with the goal of creating opportunities for elected officials to be engaged in the conversation post their election so that we can continue to be engaged and so that we can co-design policies in collaboration with those who are supposed to serve us. And so through that process, I recognize that a lot of people don't even know what Boston City Council is. They don't even know what their state rep are supposed to do. And so really, it's really creating opportunities for people to help them understand the role of elected officials and what are the day-to-day responsibilities, so that people can understand politics a little bit more. So I think some of it is the education, and then I also think that some of it is I think the city hall could do a better job to doing public service announcements about the elections are coming down the pipeline, more visibility and signage, utilizing the neighborhood liaisons to help educate folks.
Right.
And I think that, it can't just be about election time. We have to really, it's about conditioning us to recognize that engagement is all day, every day.
Right, and I agree with you there, but I'm going to push back a little bit. I'm going to be the devil's advocate because you're right. I think the city definitely plays a part in that. But like I said, I hark back to the B3 Halloween party, right? There were more people there that voted in this last election, right?
Yep.
There were no sandwich boards. There was no advertisement. There was nothing put out there, a little social media and a few flyers, and yet the numbers of people turned up for that event.
So let's talk about that, right?
Yes.
Let's really talk about that. So we live in low-income communities, right? And if you don't have resources, and if you don't have candy, and if you don't have things, you want to create an opportunity for your kids to have a good time, right? So I think some of it is need, and what is a priority sometimes is misconstrued, right?
Right. That's the point.
So, I think I understand it's accountability,
right,
and it can't just be all in one space.
Right.
And that we all have a role to play in this, right? But I also see when it's time when the iPhone comes out, people are lined up, or when the new Nikes come out, everybody's lining up to get something. But what people need to do is line up and get to the polls, because that's how we're going to disrupt the system, right? And I totally agree with you. And I think that those opportunities when people are standing in line, waiting for the Halloween party to start or the iPhone to come out, is that if we had some people out in these streets registering people to vote in those locations, right? And educating people about how important it is, and then the next week there's going to be an election, then we can utilize that energy that's in that space to actually activate people. And I think it's really about the strategy and how do we utilize those activities to engage folks in the political process.
617-282-0685, 617-282-0685. You're listening at the Roundtable with Ma'am Leo. Our studio guest, Julia Mejia, candidate for at-large city council here in the city of Boston. Pastor Hobbs again.
Yeah, Terrence E. from Grace Senior, who's tuned in from Baltimore, saying that it's not in high schools. One, he also says
right.
Civics is gone, right?
Are the elders educating? Do the elders have solutions? Trying to be proactive. And he also says, lack of trust.
That's right.
Is what they're telling me in Baltimore. They feel like people don't care about them.
Right. And, that's the sad reality, Larry. And Terrence, thank you for that comment, is that people don't feel heard and they don't feel valued. And that's a real feeling, right? And it's like an abusive relationship, right? And I think that when you think about it from that perspective, it's really hard to trust a system that has neglected you for so long. And I think that this is where, for me, why I'm running is because I really want to be able to help people understand how important voting is, and that we have to create an opportunity to show what is possible when we do rise up and we do go to the polls, because that's how dollars get poured into our communities, right? So it's really about what comes first, the chicken or the egg. So if we create an opportunity, let's see what happens, y'all. Let's all go out and vote. Let's change the dynamic around the fact that Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, and neighborhoods like ours don't come out. And let's see when we do, how would that change the way resources get poured into our community? Great.
Good. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the Roundtable with Ma'am Leo. Our guest, Julia Mejia. You have a question or comment? Good morning, caller.
Carmen, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Future City Council at large, I'm very supportive and pushing for you. This is T. Michael Thomas, and I look forward to working with you in this city to better things. We need you in office. And I'm saying it publicly. I'm one of her biggest supporters. T. Michael Thomas, the founder of the People's Academy. Great show, and I will be listening. I have to get to a meeting.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, T. Michael. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the Roundtable.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. Good morning.
This is, just full disclosure, this is Pastor Dan Walker.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Do you have a comment or question for our guest, Julia Mahir, who's the
I do. Actually, I have a question for her. She said she would like to disrupt the system.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to know what system she's referring to.
All systems of oppression. No, when I talk about disrupting the system, is really kind of, I'm thinking about the way we do business in the city of Boston. Oftentimes, it's like we're usually reacting to things that are being done to us, and there's really little infrastructure in place for a community-centered approach to discussions around planning and development, around housing. I look at the fact that oftentimes, we're looking even at the school committee right now. There's it's not an elected school board. I'd love to see more of a opportunity for people who are living these realities to really have a voice in a lot of the things that are happening here in the city of Boston. And disrupting is really, I also think about, people ask me what's going to be my first hearing. I say I'm going to do a hearing on public hearings because they happen at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday when most working class folks can't participate. I'm offering, my hope is to be able to offer childcare, because I know if we're serious about engagement, we have to remove barriers to engagement, and childcare is one of those things. And I also think that we need to have more hearings out in our community. Instead of having always people going to City Hall, we need to be able to have them in our neighborhoods. But and just take it one step further, right? It's like, no, we just didn't go to Dorchester. Check. No, how many people from Dorchester participated? Who are the people that showed up to these public hearings? Because oftentimes it's the same people participating. But I'd love to be able to expand that and making sure that we have benchmarks that we can say we're going to hold ourselves to this expectation that X amount of people from low-income communities are going to participate in public hearings and their voices are going to be heard, that we're going to offer translation and interpretation, that we're really serious about the level of engagement. And that, for me, is really what I see as a priority here in the city of Boston. It's really the lack of engagement that I have been focusing on a lot of my efforts in.
Does that answer your question, Dan?
It does. I do have another question.
Sure, go ahead.
Actually, I think that's a very good answer, and I support your efforts in doing that. I would be a little concerned about the language, but that's a personal preference. Do you consider yourself to be a Republican, Democrat, or unaffiliated, or what? What is your political
party?
Yes.
I'm a Democrat. And people have, I'm a progressive, I guess, if you will. That's the language that folks have labeled me as, a progressive. But, I see myself, if I can coin my own thing, I'm a people-centered type of individual, right? I feel like politics has gotten so far away from political affiliations, and we've lost, I feel like in many ways we've lost the real meaning of what politics is. And I think we have an opportunity to help our people understand how important it is for us to participate in this process. And so it's less about labels for me, but I am a Democrat in the sense of what the Democratic Party has been about. But I think that the Democratic Party also needs to step up and recognize that, you just can't come to and around our neighborhoods when it's time for elections and then forget about the fact that you have made promises and commitments to us, and that we continue to live in poverty, and we have not moved the needle as much as I would have liked to see, considering all the work that has been done even before I got onto this planet.
Right. Well, I let me jump in here, because I tell people myself personally, I don't register with any party. I register independent because I think both sides have made a lot of promises, and I equate it to, I should say, to going to a casino and putting your cards on the table and letting the dealer see your hand and then expect to win, right?
That's right.
So, because what happens if you say you're with this party or that party, you see if the conversation is not about Democrats or Republicans, how do we get the independents? Because they haven't told us who they're locked into. Right. So I tell people all the time, you vote for whoever you want, whatever party. But
who's going to best represent your values?
If I register, exactly, it gives me the opportunity to vote for who I want. Dan, did you have any follow-up to what she was saying?
I think what you're saying is correct. I have another time we could discuss the progressive movement in America, because I don't think the progressive movement is particularly good for America.
Well, could I
But
just
again,
tell you real quick though, as I always talk about how when we define progressive, how progressive are we if we're not really moving forward with progress, right? And I think that
well, that's part of it. But then, all of these movements have their rootings and groundings in a philosophy. And the philosophy of progressivism is one ultimately based on control, I believe. And that's only because that's what the people who have founded the progressive movement claim, and they actually say they want to control all aspects of our lives. How we eat, what we eat, where we eat, what we wear, what we can drive, when we can drive. Because they think it's better they think they know better than how the person should live.
Could I just say something real quick? Because I know there's another caller coming in, and I just want to say this while you're still on the phone, is that I know the Black Panther movement is if people were to ask me, now, I wouldn't say I'm radical to the point, but I really do believe that we need to build Black and brown political power, and whatever that party looks like and however that shows up, that's probably the party that I'll be a part of.
Well, Dan,
good.
I just want to say for folks who aren't listening, Dan Walker, who is a friend of mine, he is the host of Sound Travels here on Boston Praise Radio.
Okay.
Every Wednesday, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. You can hear him on this same channel. So folks, tune into Dan's show because it's a great show. He's got a difference of opinion sometimes, like I said, but it's an informative show. And I tell folks we should hear from all aspects of life because I learn when I tune in.
And Mr. Walker, I hope if you do live in Boston, you consider me one of your 4 votes. I'm number 4 on the ballot. I'm just gotta say real quick.
I don't live in Boston, but you sound like somebody who I wouldn't have a problem voting for. I would love to get you on my show to continue the discussion.
That's right.
We could probably go in some depth because I think people need to hear from people like you. You sound like you want to actually make change. And you don't sound like you're so far out there that I can't support you.
And
Okay.
Julia,
So
let me say,
I think this is good.
coming from Dan Walker, if you don't know Dan, that's very high praise. Trust me, Dan is very, like I said, to get him to that point this morning, I don't know, you actually, if he was here, I think he might even cast for Dan. Thank you, sir, and we'll be talking soon. I appreciate you, brother. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Good morning, caller. Welcome to At the Round Table with Mayhem Leo, our in-studio guest, Julia Mejia, at-large city councilor, candidate for at-large city council.
Good morning. How are my brothers and sisters doing today?
Good morning, Terrence.
And Brother Larry is right. Coming from there, yeah. Yeah.
She has no idea, right, Terrence?
He makes me want to come to the.
It's as close to a conversion as we're gonna get.
That's it.
Go ahead. Did you have a question, a comment for Julia?
Yes. The pilot program. I know. You spoke about this on Priscilla's show. Mm-hmm. Can you just address again your take on the pilot program?
Yes. So the pilot program is the payment in lieu of taxes, where we allow universities and nonprofits and hospitals to payment in lieu of taxes, which is they're not paying their fair share right now at this point, especially a lot of the universities here in the city of Boston. And I feel like we need to hold them accountable to making sure that they're pouring back their resources financially back into the city that they're literally profiting from. So I'm a big supporter of making sure that we uphold those taxes. And it's it's not just about community benefits, right? Because that's also a component of it. But I think that, giving our kids a scholarship here and there is great. But I think that for far too long, we see a lot of development in the city of Boston. Universities are buying up spaces here and displacing the residents of Boston, and I think that needs to be addressed.
All right, Terrence, hold on, because we got another caller. I want to bring him into this conversation. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the round table.
Good morning, Larry. Good morning, Julia. Good morning, Terrence.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. See, I only not take over your registers. I take over Larry's too.
I know. I see.
Wow, it's like the broadcaster's hour.
Exactly. Well, I just want to say that I really appreciate Julia, and I love her, and I think that she when she gets into City Hall, she's going to be what we need. We need a couple more Julias in City Hall because she's an activist, she's an advocate, she speaks her mind, she's not afraid, she stands up. And I believe her when she says that she's going to do what she wants to do. Of course, you know, Julia, that I've always my pet peeve is the Boston resident job policy, the ordinance, the fact that there's so much construction going on in the city, and that there's not a lot of people that look like us. So I want to ask you, would you support the enforcement of the Boston resident job policy? Because 2 years ago they voted for a new one, and we're still trying to get it enforced.
And before, also, you know,
I do all day, every day.
I wanted to ask you because I think it's important. Councilor Yancey said one of the first things they took out was the oversight.
I know.
Right.
I'm bringing all that. I'm bringing back the.
Would that be something that you would be?
I know we have the budget, which is the post audit. I mean, the pre audit. I think that we need to look at it in chunks, right? It's like the budget is one part of the approval process in the beginning, but then I think we need to have some checks and balances in the end, so it's not just at the end of the year like at the post. I think that we need to monitor it throughout the year because there's a lot of shenanigans happening in the city of Boston, and I think that same the Boston Jobs Residency, I think that's something that needs I would say constant oversight and review on a regular basis, because I think that there are a lot of people here in the city of Boston who can no longer afford to live here, and we have a lot of people who are working in Boston that don't live here.
Live in Boston.
And we need to, and I look at, I'm going to say something, I know this part of the police department here, so I'm going to be,
Listen,
there's a lot of police
you must not have been listening to this show much, because we don't.
In the fire department, I mean, like, I'd like to do a full assessment of, like, if you don't live in the city of Boston, we need to figure out how we're going to transition this to that situation.
Well, so if I take it from what you're saying is that you think it should be a requirement that all people live in the city. And I can tell you from my personal experience, I don't live in the city. And anyone that knows me, I spend most of my time in this city fighting for people here. I don't think that makes a difference because there are people who live in the city. If that's the case, the people in the city would be going out and voting, right? And they would be engaged in what's going on here, right? I'm probably more civically engaged in this city as well as my own than the people here. So I think I think there's a misconception that somehow you're going to get better policemen, better firemen. I find that, we also need a separation from work, right? I don't need people knocking on my door instead of calling the emergency service if that's what's needed. I'm saying if it's an emergency, I don't mind assisting, but I have a family as well, and there's no separation. Like, the mayor has a police car sitting in front of his house, so he's not disturbed. We don't have that luxury, right? So that's why I think your intentions and the folks who say that, but I don't think they fully understand that. As like you said, if you become a city councilor, your office is down at City Hall. You don't want people coming to your house all hours of the day looking for issues that are not related to you personally. So that's that little gray area that I think people.
So then I guess my question would be then, what happens to the residents of Boston? What how do we support?
Well, I think the way it is now is that you have to, if you become a police officer, you have to live in the city for your first 10 years of your career. Right. Okay. And then you can move out. And I think that's a reasonable compromise, right? But I don't think you should lock people, because here's the other piece to that, right? Saying that, and the cost to live in the city of Boston now is almost to the point where the average city employee cannot afford to live here based on rents and what it costs to acquire a home.
And right now, and this is, and mind you, I'm a first-time candidate and I've never worked in city government, so I'm going to ask a question. Sure. Right now, are there subsidies and programs and initiatives put in place to help Boston residents who work in the city of Boston to be able to live here?
Yeah, it's called a second and third job.
So then that's something. Then you know what? Now knowing that bit of information, I'm going to add that to something else that I would like to explore. Right. So if we're really about economic justice and creating spaces for people who live in Boston to stay here, then I'd like to explore how we can do that in a way that is.
Some people are equating now Boston with San Francisco in a sense, right?
It's crazy. We can't even afford to live here.
And there you have teachers in public service who are living in their cars, who have to live outside. They cannot afford to live where they work. And Boston is approaching, if we haven't already arrived at that point where it's almost economically impossible to try to purchase a home today, even
Yeah.
in neighborhoods where you could get into years ago.
So I think that that's something as a city councilor that I'd like
and
to
I
look
appreciate
into.
you being open to
No, because you know what? This is like, for me, this is why it's really important for me to hear all sides, right?
Right.
I haven't had a chance to speak with someone who, like you, in that situation. But I also think that what Priscilla has been fighting for is really important. And I think that it's the how we implement it and how
Right.
do we create spaces for people to stay here in the city of Boston through this residency, the Boston Jobs
And-
residency. And then I also think it's about construction. It's
Right.
not just about police officers. I think there are a lot of people who are on construction sites who don't live in the city of Boston too, right, Priscilla?
Right, they come from New Hampshire, Vermont, Rhode Island, and this has been going on for a long time.
well, that
And it's,
It's going to continue to go on.
Well-
It's going to continue to go on. And you know, and what Larry was saying, I mean, you got people who work in the city departments who can't afford to live in the city.
right. 'Cause
You
I
know,
mean,
and those are the ones who are getting 3 or 4 jobs just to stay in the
Yeah.
city.
Yeah, no, I
You know, so they have to bring that that income up because some of them are underpaid.
Yeah, and
You know?
Exactly.
there's 6 parents that are part of the network that I created a few years ago, and over the last year and a half, 6 have had to move to Brockton
Yeah.
because they can no longer afford to live here, but they still have to work in Boston, and they have to commute here, and we're creating further financial hardships for those folks who can no longer afford to live
right,
in
but
the city.
that's my
That-
point.
yeah.
That's why I say about locking people into not having an
Yeah,
alternative
so then
choice.
this is the solution I would like to explore is
So
figuring out how we can subsidize.
That
some of
brings
this.
me to one of my questions I was going to ask you while we're on it is housing, right? How do you have a plan that's going to address what we've just been talking about, but are you going to
Yeah.
elaborate a little bit more on
Sure.
because housing is a huge
Housing is real.
issue here in
Yeah.
Boston.
So I'll say a few things. One is when it comes to housing, when my mom and I came to this country, we bounced around from place to place, right? And it wasn't until I was in the 5th grade that I had a stable place to live for a period of time where I can stay in one school long enough to make friends. And in the city of Boston, over 5,000 students are homeless, right? So there's the housing crisis is real, and it has been forever, right? So it's not like it just happened and we're like, oh my God, in crisis mode.
And can I
I-
just say,
Yeah.
and I apologize to interrupt, is that even before, like, people were in that situation, were waiting to get a voucher for
Mm-hmm.
a housing for a Section 8 or Metropolitan, even with that now,
It's still not enough.
it's
It's not
so
enough.
that's why I
It's
just
not
wanna
enough.
add-
It's
right.
not enough, right?
So-
So here's a few things that I'd like to do. One is it's the inclusionary development policy. It's the IDP. It's set at right now at 13% for a house.
And what is that
It's
program?
it's when developers are going to build,
Mhm.
it's that they have to build at least 13% of
Okay.
affordable units, right? I'm pushing to, if you're going to build in the city of Boston, then you should build at least 50%.
Now, is there a requirement on the number of units that triggers that 13%? Do you know? Like, is it 25 units or more, or is it
No, it's
it depends.
Go ahead, Priscilla.
what is
It
it?
depends on how many units there are. It's
Right.
13% of the number of units.
Right. So I'm
But
saying if
I-
I'm building a 3-family house, that wouldn't apply to
No,
me, right?
if you're building 10, if you're building like a 10 units.
Okay, 10 units or more.
Yeah, I think 13% of that or
Okay.
whatever it
All
is,
right,
right?
okay.
And so right now, a lot of my colleagues who are running are pushing for 20% to increase it to 20%. I don't believe in incremental change in the city of Boston. We need right now to reflect the real needs of the housing crunch here, and I'm pushing for 50%. So if you're going to build affordable, it has to be at least 50% of those units have to be affordable. But the problem is that people talk about, well, then they're not going to build. I haven't seen any study out there that says that if you're not building then affordable, then no one's going to build. No, people want to make their money because they're at least going to make 50% profit
Right.
from the other units, right? So it's really about holding them accountable to what the needs are in the city of Boston. The other piece of that is that developers have the option of opting out of a building affordable, and then that money goes into the housing fund. And they can opt out of building affordable in the Seaport and downtown Boston, which further creates more segregation in the city of Boston, right? I'm hoping to push that you can't opt out of building affordable in all across the
Right.
city. So there shouldn't be pockets of concentration of areas of poverty in one places, and then everybody's living in the lap of luxury in the seaport. No, we should live in the seaport too. So really pushing that. And then I would also like to have a community-centered approach to planning and development, where it's like we get to see there's something that's a building that's going to be some parcel in our neighborhood, is that we work with the neighborhood civic associations, that we work with local nonprofit organizations and activists in the city in that particular neighborhood, and to have a community-centered approach to planning and development, and then find developers who are willing to build what we envision for ourselves. So then that way it doesn't feel like things are always being done to us. And right now that's not how it works.
So that's a good segue into our next question, because I think it ties in with the housing and the homeless, is what folks refer to as methadone mile
It's
down
just
at
really
Mass
Molina
Ave
Cass.
and Molina Cass.
That's
Exactly.
really
And that's
because
what, and
we
I'm
need
glad
to think
you
about
said
language, because it's really
Absolutely.
about how we're.
And I'm so glad, because when I hear people sometimes when they call in police language, they call Humboldt Avenue H Block, and I said, I don't know what
No.
you're talking about. I know that it's Humboldt Avenue. So you're absolutely right
It's about
in that we
language.
should refer to it, because it gives a negative connotation to what it is,
It's
right?
happening right.
So do you have any plans at the council to address what's going, because that's like the welcome into Boston, but in welcome to the black and brown community, and this is the first thing you see in the heart of the city.
Right. So I have to be real honest. During the the late '80s and '90s, when we had the crack era in our neighborhoods, when it came to, there was no, everyone talks about treatment, and it's
No, arrest was the treatment.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Right. So we need to be real about the fact that our communities, for a long time, we have that vicarious intergenerational trauma as what happened back then. Right. I think that when I look at Molina Cass, there's a number of things that we need to look at. First is it's the homelessness situation happening. There's not enough beds for folks who are struggling with addiction. And then we have people who are reentry, right? Like, we have a lot of our loved ones are returning citizens who are coming back into the community, and there's no real support or services for them either. And so that there's this, all of this is happening. People are coming out of jail, they're congregating in a place, like, it's all just crazy. And I think that I support safe injection needles, safe consumption sites in the city of Boston. I think that we need to at least contain it that
Right,
way.
but the U.S. attorney for the federal government says that those are illegal, and they would prosecute anyone who opens these sites up.
Yeah. But we have there's been studies out there that show that they help save lives, right? So let me tell you, in my campaign office is in Jamaica Plain, and right across the street, we were finishing up an event, and I have a 9-year-old daughter, and we were coming outside, and we actually witnessed somebody ODing, and we were paralyzed with fear. We didn't know what to do or how to help, and that moment really helped crystallize for me the gravity of this issue. And so we hosted a Narcan training in our campaign office, because that is the new normal, right? Like,
Right.
we had to train ourselves on how to save a life, right? And I think that the safe consumption sites help at the very least save a life. And then there's also have been studies shown that when people are in that space, that they're more likely to seek treatment. So they do serve a purpose, right? Whether it's legal or not, that is, I know that Canada has done it, and parts of Europe as well. And so I think that it's a model worth looking into.
617-282-0685, 617-282-0685. You're listening to At the Round Table with Mamley, and studio guest Julia Mejia, at-large candidate for City of Boston City Council. Julia, one of the things, education, right? That's a big topic here. We have a new school superintendent. We've actually gone through quite a few in the last probably 10 years or so. Most folks would say things don't seem to be heading in the right direction. It's almost like the MBTA, right? It's a work in progress, but we still can't get to work on time, right? So, do you have any plans to address it? Because some folks are saying that they would, the elected doesn't seem to work, that maybe they would like to go with a hybrid where, the mayor gets to appoint some people, but also some of these folks are elected. Is that something that you live, or would you like to see just an all-elected school committee?
I think we have an opportunity to have an all-elected school committee. I think it's time. for us to restore the faith in democracy. And I think
Some would
having-
say accountability, right?
accountability is really important, right? And I think that when people have an opportunity to vote for those who they know are going to really represent their issues, and they can hold those people accountable. And right now, it doesn't feel like that's the case
Right.
in the city of Boston. It gets appointed by the mayor. And I went through that process. I went through the nomination process because I'm an exponential learner. I like to figure out how things work, which is one of the reasons why I'm running for office, too. And, you know, when I went, it was a nominating citizens panel. And the first thing I said is, like, I appreciate making it to this place and this point, but I don't even think that even having citizens determine whether or not a nominating panel that was selected by others determine whether or not I even make it onto the school committee, right? So I think that doing it through the elected process is the way to go at this point.
Now, we've got several minutes, but I wanted to give you an opportunity, if there's anything we haven't covered, that are your plans, if elected to city council at large, what that would look like under Julia Mahir as a city councilor.
Yes. What would leadership look under my purview? So because I'm so committed to having a community-centered approach to engagement, I think that it really is about putting people front and center and putting people over politics, right? That's a cliche, but the fact of the matter is that that's what these times require. And I think that for me, I'm really going to be focusing on making sure that the people's voices are heard, and that we're building the city with those intentions. I also think that for me, you're always going to know what I think and how I feel. I don't have a poker face, right? And I speak from my heart. And I think that it's really important to be able to do that. I don't speak in sound bites, right? And so I think that you will always get what you see is what you get with me. So that is important for people to know. And I always lead with my values, right? And because I'm a single mom, I'm an immigrant, I grew up in a life of poverty. Like, I didn't read about this in a textbook. I didn't get word about it in the newspaper. Like, I'm living this reality every day, right? When I go to the bodega, which is the corner store, when I go with my daughter, she's 9 years old, I always say to her, let me look both ways. And if there's no commotion happening, then we can leave, right? The fact that I'm already training my daughter to live in fear speaks volumes to the work that we have to do in the city of Boston. So I really want to hold everyone accountable to these conversations. And I really do appreciate the analogy that you were making about Halloween, because it takes all of us. We can't put all of the blame on one place if we're not willing to hold ourselves accountable to what we're not doing. And so that's why I want to create opportunities for people to be participants in this process.
Right. And I appreciate that dialogue, because that's what I'm saying. It's that some people look at it as, oh, you're looking down. I'm not looking down. Like I said, I don't have a problem with helping out. But I think sometimes it's to our own detriment, right?
That's right.
Because then we tend to do less for ourselves if we think someone else is going to come in and even like the basics.
That's right.
Just voting.
That's right.
Right? So I'm saying that, is there a connection? I said, is there a database there where I said, well, maybe we ought to have folks to look. If you didn't register the last election, maybe you're not invited to the party, right? Because there has to be some accountability on the other end as well, right?
Yeah, I think that there's ways that we can utilize those events to engage people in politics.
Absolutely.
And I think that we need...
It's important.
It's important because, listen, you know what? Our ancestors died
Right.
for us to be able to have this right to vote.
And we have a
You know?
captive audience of that we don't usually get, right? That
Yeah.
many people in one space at one time
Yep.
to do that.
Yeah,
So,
and I just wanted to say one
Sure.
quick
No,
thing.
sure.
One is that for me, and I said this earlier, but I want to reiterate it, is that this is an opportunity to build Black and brown political power, and we can only do that if we're all participating in that process. God willing, I'll be the first Afro-Caribbean Latina. I claim my black roots, right? I'll be the first single mom with school-age children to represent in the city council, and the first community. I wouldn't say the first community organized. I can't say that or claim that, but it's really important when we're having these conversations, when we talk about representation. Right now, there are no Black men in city council, and David Halbert is running. So I think that we really need to look at the council as really representation. We have Ricardo Arroyo, who's running for District 5, and he's been talking about a lot of racial equity issues. So if we're really serious about bringing our people forward, then we need to have people who are running represents us in ways that look at socioeconomic status. I grew up in poverty. I still talk about poverty. That's going to be one of the things that I focus on, is creating a poverty interruption commission of sorts in the city of Boston, because that's my lived experience. And I think that for me, running is really an opportunity to change the way we do business, even the way we run campaigns. I offer childcare at my office just because I want everybody to be engaged. I'm number 4 on the ballot. The election's on November 5th. It's this Tuesday. Make a plan. It only takes 5 minutes to vote. It's not that deep. You could do it right after you drop off the kids from school. You can do it during your lunch break. You could do it before you go home. You could bring your kids with you. At the end of the day, whatever you do, please go out and vote.
Well, Julie, I'm going to say this because we've got a few minutes. So the line to get into the Area B3 on Tuesday night for the Halloween party was a lot longer. The wait was longer there than it was to get into a polling booth. So time, if you're 5 minutes, it took probably 25 minutes to get your child through that whole process there, right? To walk them through that, right? And they took the time to do that. So why not give 5 minutes of their time to do something that's going to impact them and their children in the city of Boston, not just for those couple of hours, but for the next 2 years of their life, right? That's important. But what do you say, Julia, to the folks out there who say, well, we talk about diversity, and one would say we now have a diverse city council. Matter of fact, we have more women on the council than we've ever had, and more women of color, right? So how is adding more women of color going to benefit a council that is already headed in that direction? What do you say to those folks there that's different from your approach to this?
So for me, I say this every day, and I've said it in so many different radio shows, so everybody knows this already, is that representation goes beyond race, right? I think that there are a lot of folks who are black and brown in positions of power that really don't understand the struggle, who have never lived a day in our shoes, right? So I think that representation, and not to say that that's the case with the city council now, I'm just talking about in general, is that leadership needs to open up space for people who are living, who have profound lived experience, right? Because that changes the conversation, that changes the type of questions that get asked, that changes the type of solutions that we see to some of our biggest problems. So I think that representation goes beyond race. But I think socioeconomic status is really important, which is one of the reasons why I have focused and centered my campaign around socioeconomic status, class, because class matters, right? And so I think that it's really important to have that diversity in that space that goes beyond race.
Right. I agree with that, but people say, the expectation was that, if we got a more diverse council, that the things would get better, and people would.
But it has. I'll push back on that one. Because I know that.
No, this is not my view.
I'm just saying,
folks
but like
saying
Kim Janey, Lydia Edwards,
great,
Ayanna,
absolutely.
Like I've seen some amazing things come out.
No, the work,
I
can say, you speak to Kim Janey, fantastic. I mean, and I think her work has gone unnoticed, a lot of it, because she's not out there, on a soapbox talking about it.
Right.
But when you actually go in and see what she's done some amazing work.
So this is what I'm trying to uplift, right? We've made a lot of progress thanks to these amazing women that have been in that space, and so I applaud the work. And I feel like I'm the missing link, in many ways, because I'm a community organizer, I'm an activist, I come from the streets, right? So I feel like that sense of urgency is what's missing inside city government, and I just want to be able to add to what already is happening and bring my street credibility and the work that I've been doing out here into that space. I think that is what is missing. That's the link that I want to bring.
Sure, we got some comments on the chat.
Paula F. Kelly says, I've seen Julia organize events where elected officials are invited to listen to and exchange dialogue with community members on many issues, and I've seen those electeds being it to their work, such as Anna Presley, when she was on the city council, Sonia Chang Diaz, and more. Providing those opportunities has encouraged residents to become involved in community work and holding electeds accountable long after elections. I know Julia will be that type of elected to always be listening to all sides of issues and bring it to.
Thank you, Paula.
All right, so we've got about 2 minutes, and I
Okay.
want to give them to you
Thank
to
you.
make your closing argument as to why folks should consider you for one of their votes on November
Yeah.
5th for the at-large city council position here in the
Ye-
city of Boston.
So local politics matter. And we've talked about that earlier today. Actually, they matter more than anything else, right? Because you know exactly where I live. You know how you can roll up on me and let me know about myself, right? And so I'm really hoping that people understand how important this election is. This is an opportunity for us to make history. And, you know, it's really whether you vote for me or not, I just want people to go out and vote. You can put your own name on the ballot for all I care. But just go out and get counted because that's how we're going to really shift the political power in the city of Boston. And so for me, it's really about how we win more than anything else. Winning is not just that's not the end game. It's the how we go about engaging people in the process. That's really going to leave a lasting impact here in the city of Boston. So I'm encouraging everyone to consider voting on November 5th, just like you did going out to that Halloween party.
No,
Make
it's-
sure, like, turn it into a party, y'all. Let's
Yeah.
go out and party. On Tuesday, November 5th, the polls are open from 7 in the morning until 8. My name is Julia Mejia. I'm an Afro-Caribbean Latina, the first in my family to graduate high school, college, buy a house, and get my mom out of Section 8. For me, this is about the work. I've always been about the work. I hope that you consider me. I'm number 4 on the ballot, and at the end of the day, you know, this is our opportunity to change the way we do business, and we need everybody to recognize how valuable our voice is. Our vote is our voice, and I've dedicated my entire life to my people, and I'll continue to serve as I have been all along. So
And
thank
how
you.
how does one get in contact with your
Yes.
campaign?
Oh
if
my
they
God,
want
we're
to?
trying to raise some money too. Let me find out. So listen, y'all, we need volunteers. We're hosting an event on actually tomorrow in Codman Square, right by the great hall.
Okay.
Codman and Washington on Talbot with Ayanna Presley. She endorsed me, as well as Tito Jackson. And so we're going to do something there tomorrow at 3 o'clock. So come by. And if you want to volunteer or sign up, you can find us at www.julia4boston.com. That's F-O-R, julia4boston.com. And you can find us on social media at julia4boston.com. And at the end of the day, this is really about a bigger conversation, and I'm hoping that you all will become engaged because I believe that the real work begins after we win.
Yes.
And that's what I'm hoping, that you will hold me accountable to the work that we all need to do to move this city forward.
Well, thank you, Julia Mejia, for
Thank
gracing the airways here
Thank you.
at the round table with Ma'am Lil. You've
Thank
been
you.
listening to our guest, Julia Mejia, at-large candidate for city council here in the city of Boston. Again,